All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, joined by Fangraphs Jon Tayler at this time every single week. John,
except for last week.
Except for last week, where we switched things up on a Thursday. Okay, John, that's why I thought we talked about this, by the way. Because we talked on Thursday last week,
right?
I thought the Tatis stuff happened, and we talked about it on our late week show. That's why. I'm like,
okay, I get that. I mean, look, every day feels like a week. Every week feels like 3 months. Like it has been the case the last 2.5 years. So I understand that no one has a good sense of time right now.
No, and timelines.
It's all
and
relative
else.
anyway.
And I've run the numbers, and the people really want to talk about which run was their favorite the Braves scored on the New York Mets last night. For me, number one was pretty cool with William Contreras with this home run using Edwin Diaz's music, which a lot of folks did not know that he's been using that all year. But a home run there. Eddie Rosario with a 95 exit velo right after him to right field. Pretty cool. That was one of my favorites. Let's see, where else? Anytime Vaughn Grissom was sent home was fun time, because watching him run the bases, and he had a great play where I wrote about this today. Is like Vaughn got from first to third on a Michael Harris, just like little bloop. I don't know. Did you watch the game last night, John?
No, I didn't get a chance to watch it.
Well, it was 7.5 hours long because there was an hour and 15-minute rain delay, and then the Braves had like I think was this the 6th inning or 7th inning when it broke open, but that was like an hour, and it was like we were looking at like 2.5 hours in like
the part I did see was about that rain delay, because the Mets finally did the kind of thing they would have done in recent years, which was to put Carlos Carrasco back in after an hour and 15-minute rain delay, and then he gets hurt like 5 minutes later, but
he did not come back in.
Yeah, so
and now he's out.
I mean, this series is still happening. The second game in it's going to start in about half an hour from when we're talking.
Yes.
This, I believe, is the last time these two teams meet until close to the end of September, correct?
Yeah, because it's another 4-gamer.
So this is really... It's not Atlanta's last chance to force the division, but this is a series that... obvious thing is obvious. They pretty much have to win in order to keep they have to win this series to keep their division odds alive. I mean, Fangraphs odds right now before this last night have this currently as Mets ahead percentage-wise by 86.8 to 13. So take back this series will basically end the NL East if the Mets win it. So
I don't know about that, John. I mean, I will say, here's what sucks: is the Braves get the Astros right after, so this whole week is just a murderer's row.
Well, and that's part of the thing.
In the same week.
Well, that's part of the thing with the projections we have too. Is it's noting into account like the season schedule is not favorable, and at this point in the season, like 3 or 4 games against the Astros, however many it is, that's already a significant chunk of season left. And I don't know like fully what the Braves schedule looks like. We have them with a strength of schedule of 504, which is considerably higher than the Mets, who have a 488 strength of schedule projected for the rest of the season. So our projections think the Mets have an easier schedule down the stretch. That is obviously going to be huge because, I mean, right now it is a 4.5 game gap, and I don't think most people would look at that and go, oh, well, that's like 80. We have it as 87%, I think, for the Mets to win the division. It's like, oh, that's not, the end, but it's pretty dang close. And how many more games are left in the series? Tuesday and Wednesday, and that's it?
No, Thursday, too.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay, so if the Mets win 2 of those 3, this would be a 6.5 game lead again with about 5 weeks to go. No, maybe like 6, closer to 6. That's just not a lot of time to make that up, especially when they only have a handful of head-to-head games left at this point.
Well, how many more times can we throw Spencer Strider out there against the New York Mets? That's what people are wondering, because that man talked some shit last week and then backed it up, gets 5 innings, only 4 Ks. Not a big K night for the mustache legend.
Does that really count as backing it up? 5 innings, 4 strikeouts?
He came in. I mean, he could have gone out after Carrasco didn't come back out after the hour and 15-minute rain delay. Spencer came back out and was fine.
Why did the Braves do that? Why are they bringing their pitcher back out after an hour and 15-minute rain delay?
He's got that dog in him.
But that's the thing. Like, Atlanta really does want this division, and for obvious reasons. Like, there is.
Well, we want to do the whole streak all over again, the 14 year in a row. We want to start that all over.
Yeah, especially because as we're seeing from, as we've already seen with the postseason schedule coming out, like being that number one team and not having to do that, not having to go through that wild card series, having to play as many as 3 games in 3 days, and then immediately having to flip over into the division series just against a completely rested team. How far? I mean, the Dodgers are going to be the number 1 seed in the NL, no problem. But the only way the Braves make it to the number 2 seed is by winning the NL East, because otherwise it's the Mets. So you end up as that number 1 wild card. Now you're the number 4 seed. Now you're traveling to take on, or you're hosting. How did they set it? Is it 3-6 and 4-5?
I think so.
I've already, like, it's funny that they put out the postseason schedule, and yet I still cannot for the life of me remember how the postseason actually works now. All they had to do was add 1 round, and I've already just been like, no, I'm lost. Like, my brain could only handle 3 rounds at a time. 4 rounds is too many. This is my problem with the NCAA tournament too. There are too many rounds.
Yeah,
Make it
right.
faster.
It is 3-6-4-5.
It is 3-6-4-5. So if you're Atlanta, you win the top wild card. You are now looking at facing the number 2 wild card right off the bat, and that is going to be either Philly or San Diego. Do you want that in a short series? Do you want Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler in a short series?
No,
Do you want
Philly. Yeah, they're
like?
not worried about
I mean, either way, it's like point being.
I don't want San Diego.
Even more, it's like you just don't want to play in that series. You just do not want to play in that series. You do not want your season to come down to 2 games out of 3 against another very good team all in 3 days, then immediately have to flip and face, either the Mets or the Dodgers with no rest, and in a series where you're going to have to use 4 pitchers or 4 starters, like, regardless. You're not going to be able to short it. Or not have to use 4, because it is still the best of 5. But regardless, it's a much harder road for the Braves to defend this World Series championship if they go in as a wild card again, or if they go in as a wild card rather.
Yeah, I don't know. I still just nothing would surprise me if the Mets won this division. It would not surprise me. They're a very good team. The Braves won it. I also wouldn't be surprised. But I will say, like you said, tonight, tomorrow, Thursday, critical. I don't love that Scherzer and DeGrom are still on the docket for this week. But we'll see.
Yeah, the whole Jacob deGrom coming back from injury and immediately looking exactly like himself again. It'd be very interesting if his future just ends up being like he can only throw like 80 innings a year because he does so max effort that it's impossible for him to throw more, but they're the 80 best innings anyone will throw in baseball that year. The reliever starter.
I was gonna say, then just make it the all-time.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think he can, and this is something I'm curious to see with DeGrom going forward, depending on health and a million other things, especially because he's already, I believe, 33, 34. He's already up there age-wise in terms of, baseball players, not the rest of us. It's funny, I had a moment I called Chris Bassett middle-aged, or in his mid-30s. And so I was looking at my BP annual to look at my, I was trying to find my Tyler Soderstrom comment from last year because we're going to talk Shea Langoliers. I realized I'd called Chris Bassett going to his mid-30s. He's younger than I am. It's like, he's not even really in his mid-30s, and I made him sound ancient. But anyway.
Well, I mean, that's how we are as sports writers, John, is we're now in our mid-30s, and when we talk about, oh, man, are they really running out this old guy? Like, are they really doing this? And you're like, this person's my age. Or like,
yeah, you're like, they're talking about, like we talk about Nelson Cruz, who is 42 years old, as if he is made of bones. Or, like, Albert Pujols, who's 41, and, like, the way he's treated within baseball is like you expect them to give him a walker anytime he has to go to first base.
You're amazed that he gets out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, where it's like, how do you have this energy, old man? Like, shouldn't you be asleep by 6? And it's like, guys, he's only like a few years older than us at this point.
Yeah.
But no, what I was going to say is I don't think that the way DeGrom operates would function as a reliever because I don't think he can go max effort either for like an extended period of time or in the bursts that a reliever would need to do it. He'd have to throttle something back. Like, that's why I'm super interested to see how things go and if he can continue doing this, because if he can actually do a full season of this, like, again, without injury, like, holy hell, that's the best pitcher in baseball by miles. That's insane to think about.
And no
yeah, I will be very interested to see. Actually, he's basically throwing just like 2 pitches right now, a fastball and a slider, except it's a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and a 93-mile slider. Dude it's really something watching Jacob deGrom pitch. I watched his start against the Phillies, and I was just, he does whatever he wants as a pitcher. It's something I feel like I haven't seen since Pedro. Like, it's really special. So yes, that's not a fun thing to look forward to if you're a Braves fan.
But
Max Scherzer is the easier one to face.
But even with all that being said, like, it's still just fun. Like, important baseball is fun, and this time of year is fun.
Oh, yeah.
Just like every inning. But I mean, last night was a blowout. But even still, you weren't like. It was just. It just is important. It's appointment viewing. Like, I'll have a DVR, and I'm gonna jump into it after we get off here. But like, it's just. This is some of the best part of being a sports fan is just baseball in the fall. Is like we're getting really, really close to that when your team's still in it, and now just. That when the Mets are good, I think it's more fun for the Braves. Like, this is fun. Like, I like that the Mets and the Braves have this real rivalry, and you can tell that the Braves are just like, oh, same old Mets. We'll see it. We'll see if you can actually make it through. Like, we've heard this so many years in a row that, like, yeah, this is when you're turning the corner. This is when you're turning the corner. And then let's see. But this, obviously, like what we just talked about, it feels the most real. All that being said, Acuna's hot right now. Vaughn Grissom is a legitimate everyday player right now. You go up and down this lineup. Our lineup is just...
Braves have a really good
stacked.
lineup. It's a really, really good lineup, even with having to deal with Marcell Ozuna. It's a good lineup.
And
they
he
really
was
are not
in the lineup last night. Like, he...
Yeah, I mean, that's... And, like, I don't know if Grissom is someone who is going to stick past when Albies gets back. I know, you know,
That's
there's like... I know there's that concern of what Albies is going to be when he gets back. You know, he has not been the most consistent player really at any point in the last 2 seasons, but no, this is a very, very good lineup right now, and it's a good lineup that actually has some usable flexibility and some youth in it. Like, I thought losing Adam Duvall was going to be killer, but they have the Robbie Grossman Eddie Rosario combo has worked pretty well. They have survived with Ozuna for the most part. Like, Contreras has been genuinely startable, like, and like I mean the biggest part of it too being Michael Harris just being able to come up and do what he's done straight out of Double-A and be not just a great defensive center fielder, but also be able to handle himself at the plate, be also able to steal bases. It's like shows genuine, legitimate power. Like, it's really a testament in part to Atlanta's player development, which is just very, very good. But yeah,
well,
this team
goes
is
back
just...
to the teams when they're like, we want to burn it down, right? When teams are like, oh, we want to do the full teardown. It's like, well, if you don't have the organizational structure and the scouting department and just the right guys and power to identify that talent so that you can... Because a lot of it's like, oh, it's lucky the Braves have now Grissom and Harris, who both skipped Triple-A and are both thriving immediately at the major league level. It's like, well, no, they still developed those guys. They still identified the right kind of guys who could make that jump. Everybody can do this thing, but it's more complicated than just acquire a bunch of great farm system guys and build it up. Like, it's more complicated than that.
I mean, we were talking about that with the Tigers last week with Avila, that, you know, they're a prime example of what happens when you do a full teardown rebuild, but you don't have the staff and personnel in place to turn those prospects into anything more than numbers in a farm system for farm system rankings. Like, Atlanta succeeded what it's done because it does, like, it, you know, it's funny in thinking about back to the Soto trade and what the Nationals got in return and how it's just idea like they got a huge package of prospects and it's like these are all great prospects. Like, yeah, but is Washington any good at turning prospects into valuable major leaguers? Like, the 3 best players they've ever had come through their system, Steven Strasburg, Bryce Harper, and Juan Soto, pretty clearly did not need their help in that many ways. Like, which is not it's not to take away anything that Nationals scouts and coaches and player development people did, but like those were like 2 of those were #1 picks who were supposed to be superstars and were when healthy, and the other apparently is a clone of young Ted Williams who just was given to them. Like, the dude had insane walk rates on his own in the minors. Meanwhile, all the other prospects we talk about previously with the Nationals, Carter Kieboom, Pedro Severino, like, you know, the variety of like just semi-toolsy outfielders they have churned through in the last seemingly forever. Like, they don't really show a high hit rate on that. So yeah, it all the more point to being that Atlanta is really, really good at this, and if there is any hope for them to like catch the Mets at this point or get past the Mets, it's because of guys like Harris and Strider and now Vaughn Grissom and all those young dudes who can come up and actually make an impact, or guys like Kyle Muller, or guys like was it Bryce Elder they brought up randomly?
Yes.
Yeah, like
got sent back down. Yeah,
right. But it's like having that having that depth. Even Ian Anderson, who's been terrible this season, but is still someone who at least has the upside of, well, there is something possibly there. There is some value there. I mean, the Braves hung on to Kyle Wright past a point I think most teams would have either given up or shipped him off somewhere else, and they've been rewarded for that. They've figured something out with Kyle Wright. They're just good at this kind of stuff. The real struggles they've seemed to have had are more things like Charlie Morton just is very clearly like has hit some kind of end for himself, or just injury.
Like, no matter what, this year is it for him. Or
injuries have kept Albies from being a consistent presence on the field and have interrupted his development at the major league level. Whatever it is, it happens to be. But Atlanta has shown a good ability to take those lumps in stride. They've just shown a good ability to patch holes with the good depth they have, and a lot of that is that player development. Michael Harris was not a household name except for prospect folks and like hardcore Braves fans before now, and like we're going to be talking about him in the postseason 100%.
So he's the best 9-hitter in baseball right now, but he's also just like an amazing fielder, and just having him in center for years to come, like he is so good. He had a brilliant catch last night in this one too. He's just great. Like, it's just going to be so much fun watching him for years to come, and I'm just so curious to see how the Braves navigate this winter, because we have now entered too many guys territory with Albies, with Swanson, with Grissom, with you just insert player name here and you're like, Contreras, Darno. You go up and down this list and you're like, I mean,
Swanson's going to be an interesting choice for them. I'm going to be interested to see what they do there.
Grissom's good, and this is real. They have their in-house replacement.
I mean, we'll see. I think the Braves ultimately don't do it anyway for the same reason they didn't want to do Freeman, which is they just don't want to guarantee money to guys approaching or over 30, which is firmly where Dansby Swanson is. But it'll definitely be, because like at least with Freeman, like once they had the Olsen trade, you were like, okay, well they actually upgraded, so they're fine. Or if not upgraded, at the very least maintain status quo. It's going to be really, really hard for them to, or for 2022, I should say. It's going to be really, really hard for them to find a better 2023 shortstop than Dansby Swanson, unless they're willing to pay for someone at the top end of the market. So if they're willing to pay for a Correa, they're willing to pay for a Xander Bogaerts, they're willing to pay for, whoever it happens to be. And I mean, you can make an argument that, Xander Bogaerts not necessarily better than Dansby Swanson, but, you get my drift. Top of the free agent class. Or it's going to have to be some...
The way they might look at it is like, even if we have a dip, because we can't replace his production and what Dansby would be in 2023, and we just plug in Grissom, we're still betting on Michael Harris having a big bump. So 162 game set.
Sure, yeah, and there are a lot of other moves that the Braves obviously will make and need to make and are going to have to make at some point in the offseason that'll determine that. But if he is already such a big part of what they're doing too, I do just wonder if that is part of it too. I guess they showed with Freeman it's not necessarily the biggest thing. Like Freeman, if there's anyone who should have been a lifetime Brave of anyone in that group, it should have been Freddie Freeman. And if anyone who probably wishes he were a lifetime Brave, it's Freddie Freeman.
Frank Core went through this weird back and forth, and look, both Part V guys, we stand together, but he had this weird 7-second explainer for why Matt Olson, why it was a little bit complicated. He was going the Heat in Georgia, but it was, and then he was and that adjusting from the Oakland Heat to Georgia Heat is, but he's but yes, he is from Georgia, so he was accustomed to the Heat, and I was like, what is happening? The Heat is not an issue. Matt Olson
Frenchie.
I was like, what is happening? He was, it was just one of those things where he realized when he was doing that analogy or going down that rabbit hole, he's like, wait a second, he's from here, so I can't do this. And we all went to the same high school. It was just funny. There was a 7-second of just, you ever just hear someone just talk their way into a corner where you're like, oh, there's just no way around it. He was like, no, this is what Frenchie just said. We can just throw that out the window. That was 7 seconds of what was that?
Bless Frenchie's heart. He's just trying to be a nice guy.
I mean, you got to fill time, man. And sometimes
that's that too. There is a lot of time to fill in a Major League Baseball broadcast.
Yeah, and sometimes you're just like, hey, the heat might be an issue. John, what is an issue is the Oakland A's are not a good baseball team in 2022. However, old friend Shea Langoliers, seen in person.
Is this just a Braves podcast now? Is this what we are?
when the Red Sox are this bad and the Braves are this good, it's just there's going to be a little bit more of a...
You're like, Fernando Tatis, never heard of him.
John, I'm not mad at Fernando Tatis. I'm disappointed, like AJ Preller at this point, but...
I don't know which of his excuses I found more amusing so far. The ringworm one was really good. His dad saying, no, it's not actually ringworm, it was for a fungal infection from a haircut was somehow even better. Oh man, I just want to know how angry Rob Manfred got when he saw that news. I want to see that moment where he learned that one of like the face currently of like baseball. Oh man, that's a bad one. That's a really bad one. Well, it's also
just like we need to legislate this out of the game somehow, is players coming out after the fact, because there's only a couple of these a year now. We don't get these all the time anymore. Like, that's something that I think players who are getting popped need to understand now, is that this is not a common occurrence anymore.
No.
So the ringworm defense is not a real thing. So
no,
understand that we all know you can't do this anymore. We all know what happened here.
A number of people, I think Craig Calcaterra is one I remember, I think, writing about it in his newsletter, was like, I don't understand why more players basically don't just say, whoops, my bad, I was doing something because I really was, and in Tatis's case, I genuinely do believe it was like I was trying to recover more quickly from an injury, I took something I shouldn't have taken, I made a mistake, I will change, whatever. It's like, that's all you need to do at this point, because the majority of people will see that and go, all right.
Yep.
Like, people are really only truly going to get mad at you and start to think of you as some kind of either malevolent or fraudulent persona if you do shit like, it's for ringworm. That makes you sound like... The whole idea should be, try to sound as little like Alex Rodriguez did when talking about this stuff as possible. Saying it's for treating ringworm is something Alex Rodriguez would have said. So don't say it. That just can't be your excuse. Either make up a better one or just own it. That's really...
Right.
How does someone who signed a $200+ million contract not have someone who can give him the advice of lie better?
Can you imagine if he came out and just said, well, it got me paid, didn't it?
Seriously, I mean, that'd be really funny.
The full-on villain mode right there.
Yeah, I don't like the... I realize I just did this, actually. I don't like PED discourse, generally, because it just turns into kind of scolding and morality. So it's like, I don't care. Like, these guys are taking it because they want to be better at the sport that can make them life-changing sums of money. Like, not every guy is going to play by the rules. There are procedures and things in place to stop guys from doing that stuff. I don't really want to judge their moral core because they did this, whatever, they're baseball players. It doesn't matter.
People are always going to try and bend the rules. Like, this is
exactly
not new.
People are going to take steroids forever. It doesn't matter. It is always going to happen, because when you incentivize the sport to the degree that you do, you're going to end up with people willing to do literally whatever they can to reach the peak of it. Like, what I do find interesting, though, is... One, the reactions from both Mike Clevenger, who is a renowned ass in so many degrees.
This was wild.
And an expert in showing his ass was like, we just have to hope he makes best of second chances. Like, of all the people to be saying this, the other one I really loved was AJ Preller complaining about how there doesn't seem to be enough trust between Preller and Tatis, or between the Padres and Tatis. I'd be like, that is absolutely rich coming from the dude who allegedly had an off-the-books injured list, essentially, while on the team, to deceive other teams when it came to trades, so they didn't have to share injury history. Like, come on, guys! Like, really? Like, let's not pretend this is anything other than it is, which is guy took this supplement, or whatever it is exactly, whatever clobazole, whatever it is.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it. Yeah.
It's funny because it sounds enough like the ringworm medication clobazole that there was, for a moment, I was like, maybe this is actually plausible. And then Tatis's dad was like, no, it's not that.
You're going to the team doctor. You're just going because that's an easy thing that you go to the team doctor and you're like, hey, I have ringworm. Can y'all prescribe me the basic medication that you guys obviously have to treat ringworm?
It's not like an uncommon athlete affliction, ringworm.
Exactly.
Like, these guys are surrounded by the most disgusting substances on earth.
That's not a thing.
For a minute, when it said ringworm, I initially read it as heartworm, and I was like, Fernando, you're the stupidest person on earth if you're going to try to get people to believe that you're an 11-year-old golden retriever. Like, I almost tweeted something to that effect before realizing they said ringworm instead. But but like with the Tatis stuff, like, it's just the more interesting thing to me is just like, whatever his reputation is going to be after this is going to be whatever it's going to be. Like, as we've seen before, like, one steroid test does not damn you to it, like, does not result in eternal damnation so long as you play the part going forward. Like, David Ortiz is the obvious example, even though there is no actual proof that he failed a steroid test. I'm obliged to do that as a homer. Mm-hmm. But there is plenty of time for Tatis, as young as he is, to win people back and, improve his reputation and say all the right things. I don't think
he lost any people, right? Like, I think people who are older, like, sports writers, they're out. Like, he's out. Like, if they were
well, there's always going to be, like, the Tom Verducci group that is, like, the second the word, the words failed PED test show up for a player, he's out. Like, they're never going to trust him again. He's persona non grata. He did the worst thing you can do in baseball aside from gamble on it, at least in their eyes. Like, I think there are going to be some Padres fans he's going to lose, particularly if the Padres don't win the World Series this year, which is not to say like he is the difference between the Padres winning the World Series or not, but that also isn't to say he very well could be the difference between the Padres winning the World Series or not. He very well could have come back, had a ludicrous September and October, and if not single-handedly carried them to the World Series, at the very least he was going to play a very, very large part in it if he was healthy. And based on how he was playing in rehab games, he certainly seemed healthy. So I think they're definitely going to be some...
this is not the first time. Like, he had the motorcycle. Like, what was his answer when he was like, which one?
When they asked him about them. Yeah, and also there clearly seems to be an issue here where Fernando Tatis Jr. is... I'm going to sound like everyone's dad, but he's cruising for a bruising at this point. Like, he keeps making bad, dumb decisions.
Manny Machado was somewhere like, look, I tried to tell you guys. Like, Manny Machado was like...
Machado's got to be there like, I got crucified for not running out a ground ball once, and this dude's out here with a motorcycle accident and steroids within 6 months of each other. That's really impressive. But, like, that's the thing. Like, forget the steroids as a moral thing. I think it just shows that Manny Machado, that Fernando Tatis Jr. seems to make really bad decisions and then doesn't know how to cover up those bad decisions, which is a sign of someone who isn't particularly bright when it comes to this stuff. Like, that has to be a concern for the Padres at this point. Like, is this dude just kind of a shithead?
Like, it's guaranteed. Like, that's the other problem.
And he already got his money. And, like, on the one hand, if Fernando Tatis comes back and is still kind of a dumbass, but at least, like, plays like Fernando Tatis Jr., and the steroids truly didn't seem to have any, there didn't seem to be any difference between pre-steroid and post-steroid Tatis, everyone will be fine. It'll be an awkward like marriage going forward, but everyone will be fine as long as he produces and matches the contract. If he doesn't, then we're in for a really, really bad time. Everyone is going to have a really bad time with that, because the Padres, especially given that in the next 2.5 years they have to figure out if and when they want to give Juan Soto the biggest contract in Major League Baseball history, are like, okay, but we have $200+ million to this guy who just got popped for steroids and was in a motorcycle accident and may not be all that good a dude when it comes to like accountability and responsibility. Which is not to say like Tatis can't improve. He is only 22, however old he is. He's been a super prospect since he was 18. He's the son of a major league player. Like, he's the face of not just the franchise but also baseball as a whole.
23.
I got to imagine his ego is probably the size of a small planet by now. Like, that shit happens, and that is understandable. It's just the focus from here, I imagine, just has to be like, okay, man, we get it. You're great, but, like, don't screw this up. Do not screw this up. Like, you do not want to screw this up, because you are, again, like, this is, and it's going to be really weird if this ends up being the path of his career, unintentionally or otherwise. Like, when that dude came into baseball, the immediate thought was, it's A-Rod again. That was that feel, right? That it was new A-Rod. He did all the things A-Rod did brilliantly at his prime. And not only that, but he was exciting and he's
throwing the ball 90 miles per hour at short,
photogenic. Like, he's a superstar. He knows how to play the media. Yeah, like a new A-Rod essentially. And well, he definitely made his first mistake, or at least was caught in his first mistake earlier than A-Rod was when it came to the steroid stuff. And I guess that's the thing. Like, you almost wish the two of them could sit down. Maybe not so much talk to each other. They would kind of need a translator, because A-Rod just kind of goes on in like weird business speak. But
we don't know if he was like that early on.
Yeah, but like I said, it's like, just don't do what A-Rod would have done. Think to yourself, what would a young A-Rod have done in this situation, and do the immediate opposite of it when it comes to, at the very least, off the field decisions. If not, should I put this like supplement or pill in my body despite the fact that
just
it's very much against the rules.
Like, Derek, what did you think of all of that?
Yeah, I don't want to be like, what would Derek Jeter do? Because who cares? Like, he's a weird, mopey, boring weirdo. But
wow, going
that's not
hard.
That's not even. Oh, like you've heard 10 times worse from me on this subject. But like,
wow,
I've tweeted 10 times worse than that. But anyway,
it just came out, sir.
It is worrying about Tatis, so it does make me worry. Like, these are not just bad decisions, they're dumb decisions. And that's the concerning part. It's like, you need to be smarter than this, or otherwise this is not going to work out, my dude. And this is not a career that should have that happen to it.
Well, the thing is, like, there's no foresight, right? Where I think that's where A-Rod would come in, where he's like, dude, I promise, like, I would love to be in the Hall of Fame, but I have no path to the Hall of Fame. Like, A-Rod, I think, talked about that this week, where he was like, if I could do it all over again, I would, make these adjustments. Like, it was stupid. Like, A-Rod was going to be a Hall of Fame player no matter what. Like, he was that kind of player right away.
Yeah, it's like, he's like, and Tatis already looks like he could be on that same track.
Right.
Or at least did. And, like, I also, like, who knows what he's going to look like after this? There's really no way to account.
Well, like, even if you don't the steroids, the injury stuff's real. Where it's like his
the injury stuff is real.
He might be an injury-prone player, and that might just alone derail him.
Yeah, this might be. He might be closer ultimately to someone like Nomar Garciaparra, bless his soul, than he would be to someone like A-Rod. And not just that's certainly not a bad career by anyone's stretch of the imagination. Nomar had a wonderful career. It's just, again, and not to tie it to like the personal fortunes of the people who own the Padres, but $200+ million is now tied up in the whole future of that franchise was tied up in his one person.
Yep.
From 2021 essentially onward. Like, for the next this was supposed to be Fernando Tatis Jr.'s decade, both with the Padres and with MLB. Aside from Bryce Harper, who is the other like forward-facing MLB star you see in advertisements? Aside from local guys in local markets.
Well, going forward, who do you think is next man up? If you like remove Tatis now and he's out and you're not marketing him next year, like, who are some early contenders that could fill the void? Who makes sense?
Soto's certainly.
Yeah,
I think
that'd
especially
be awkward,
if
the same team.
I think Soto's a guy. It depends on how much he would want to do that, because obviously the easy answer is Ohtani. I guess that would be the other guy we've seen would be Ohtani as part of as one of the forward-facing MLB guys. Obviously, there's a language barrier with him, and to a certain degree with Soto as well. But still, like, they are the best players in baseball by a lot, in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Aaron Judge
Gear up for Michael Harris, man.
Aaron Judge being the other one, especially because Judge is going to sign an enormous contract this offseason. So, but yeah, it's a small group of guys that you can think of where you're like, these are the faces that MLB has. Tatis was one of them. He is not for the foreseeable future. It is, because that's the other thing. Like, people will forget, people will forgive. Like, I don't think anyone's necessarily going to hold this over Tatis forever unless he either doesn't change and does it again, or is a shell of himself, and then people are like, well, I guess that answers that. But there are definitely going to be people who are not going to forgive him. And there are definitely going to be fans who, for the rest of forever, are going to be like, steroids, cheater. Like,
especially if they go down in flames this year, where it's like you made this all-in move for Juan Soto.
Especially if the Padres do not win this in this postseason, he is going to have to answer a lot of questions when he comes back about all this stuff. It is going to hang over him until it does not anymore, and that's part of it. It's like, how eager is the league or anyone else going to be to want to have him as the face if it's like, oh, the black cloud constantly hanging over the Padres in the form of Fernando Tatis Jr.
I think
it's awful. I hate it. I just hate it.
Yeah, and I think he's meeting with the team and players later this week. But like, I don't think it's going to be an easy road back for him, because like, if you read the direct quotes from Musgrove and Clevenger about him,
they were harsh. Like, baseball players don't talk
about their own teammates. Like,
they do not. Like, I remember when we were talking about the Clayton Kershaw Matt Olson thing. Like, to hear Kershaw say, even as veiled as it felt, it was like, you don't hear that. Like, the way Musgrove talked, Freeman. Yeah, especially the quote, like I said, that Clevenger gave, which was two-faced as hell, but at the same time, like, usually
I have them in front of me. I'll read them both.
Usually don't air guys out like that.
For sure. And I'll read these out just for the listeners who, if you did not see it from a couple days ago. Clevenger said, quote, to Dennis Lynn, quote, "It's the second time we've been disappointed with him, and you hope he grows up and learns from this and learns that it's about more than just him right now." Joe Musgrove also said, quote, "He's a young kid. He's going to learn his lessons or whatnot. But ultimately, I think you got to start showing a little bit of remorse, and you got to start showing us that you're committed to it and that you want to be here. I think there is a real
that's not, those are not good quotes. And like, granted, steroids is one of those things where with major league players, they are by and large despise steroids, particularly pitchers. For some, I remember hearing like Justin Verlander hates steroids and he thinks steroid guys are the lowest of the low. So like, I think that's probably part of it too, is like these guys do not like steroid users at all. You know, that's the other thing. This is a black mark on him just within the league, you know, with the players around him too, unless he really, you know, and it also just sounds like someone that the players around him, they don't seem to particularly like him.
Right.
You know,
and so it's like young guy, like it's just, he rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
The brash young dude who they gave, who got who got more money than most of these guys have combined for in their lives before he turned 20, before he's old enough to rent a car. I can understand how that's like, and is you know, he's flashy. I shouldn't say flashy. That's not the right way to put it. He plays in a very flashy way. He just dresses in a very flashy way. He is in commercials. He is in advertisements. Like, you know, he is one of the faces of baseball. Like, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of guys in that clubhouse who are probably feeling a little extra not happy with him at this point. You know, I do wonder that too, at least from a clubhouse chemistry perspective, you know, because that stuff is real. That stuff does matter. Like, what is this going to do to the Padres going forward? Like, granted, Tatis won't be there for the rest of the year. I'm sure he'll come, he'll do his apology, he'll talk to his teammates, and then he'll probably pop up here and again. But it is something they have to figure out, especially ahead of next season. And it's something they especially have to figure out, given that, again, they have to make a really big decision on Juan Soto at some point in the next 2.5 years. They already have to start making a really big decision on rotation options, given that they no longer have Mackenzie Gore going forward because of the Soto trade. Yu Darvish is going to be a free agent, and so is Blake Snell. There's one more year left on Mike Clevenger's contract, and he hasn't really fully looked like the same guy he was before Tommy John surgery, and really since he was in Cleveland. Their long-term future pitching-wise right now is Joe Musgrove, and that's really it. Like, they have a lot of work they're going to need to do to either to spend money to keep guys like Snell or Darvish around, or to start acquiring those guys from somewhere else. And they just, for as much as we can argue about whether or not, you know, Washington got enough or got great, you know, they got a lot of prospects. They got a lot of San Diego's really good prospects. You know, they got the guys that would have been used for, you know, otherwise to acquire a really big pitching target. Granted, they got Soto. That's awesome. There's literally no better acquisition you can make than Juan Soto. But the Padres have a lot of tough decisions in front of them, and Tatis just made their decision-making process way, way more difficult and way thornier. And that is not something I think that anyone in that franchise, player, front office, coach, anyone is going to be obviously they're not happy about it, but I don't think that's something they're going to be slow to forget either. You know, that this is really the ultimate me over the team, because again, he got caught for a steroid that was popular in the 80s in East Germany. This is not a hard steroid to detect. This is not some super Tour de France like created in a weapons bio lab like ultra steroid. This is something that's been around forever, to the point where I genuinely do wonder if he did consume it by, if not accident, at least stupidity. But like, regardless, that doesn't help his case either. And it doesn't. Regardless, whether you did it for the wrong reasons, the right reasons, because you weren't thinking, it's ultimately selfish, and that's just not gonna work for that clubhouse, for that team. They are in, boy, the Padres are in a real state now, at the very least, in terms of, I guess we'll see too, like how they perform like going forward, because that just has to be such a deflating thing to go from, you know, your superstar MVP candidate shortstop is almost back to, oh hey, sorry guys, he's gone for this year and also a chunk of next, and he took steroids. Oops, that's a tough one. Bad. That is after the trade deadline too. Which, granted, it's not. I mean, this was a sample from March. It's not like Tatis did steroids on August 1st or on August 4th or whatever. But like, still, the timing of it also is just adds to the misery of where the Padres are at.
Can we also add the misery component? Another West Coast team, the A's.
There we go. Back
up Shea Langoliers.
Finally back to Shea Langoliers.
John, what do you make of the A's calling up Langoliers? Do you think this is a positive development? Are you excited about seeing what Shea looks like on the major league level? And also, do you feel like there is a bounce back potential for Oakland next year in the AL West?
Oakland next year in the AL West? No, probably not. I mean, no, because Oakland, the A's have made it very clear that absent the city of Oakland or the state of California or some combination of the two, giving them a stadium for like literally no money, they are not going to spend money on the major league product. Because in the eyes of A's ownership, it's more valuable to them to run a franchise at basically $0 or as close to zero as they can, regardless of how few fans show up or how many show up or whatever, because they'll still make money from a bunch of other stuff. I think they're back now on the revenue sharing, and eventually they don't want to be in Oakland anyway. They would rather move the team to, I guess Las Vegas is going to get used again in this possibility. Maybe they'll talk to one of the other expansion hopeful cities and try to wheedle something out of them. But regardless, no Oakland A's team is one to be excited about at this point, because they're not going to make the necessary moves to get the A's from anything other than like semi-intriguing contender if literally 25 different things break right. That's kind of the thing. Like, the ideal A's team, at least given their constraints, is like a 3-WAR player at every position making the league minimum. And so it's like, it has to happen with guys like Langoliers, because Langoliers is the kind of dude where, particularly based on his profile, he's a good defensive catcher who has some contact issues but has a good amount of power and a decent walk rate. You know, he will put up league average offense generally, which at that position is way better than league average. He will put up usually pretty good defensive numbers. I know they've kind of been up and down on him, but still, he had a good reputation coming out of Baylor as a defensive catcher. He's held one throughout his time in the minor leagues. He's added the power. Nathaniel Holtz, who is a good Twitter follow if you're into the Oakland A's farm system, which there are definitely some of you out there.
Real sickos.
Yes, he comped him to Mike Napoli with a slightly better glove, or with a better glove.
That's an everyday player for years.
That is an everyday player for a good solid 4 or 5 years, or at the very least until they are no longer cost controllable, at which point Oakland decides you are not an Oakland A anymore. But, right. I mean, our projections have... our projections have Langoliers as roughly a 2-WAR player next year. That's a starter at catcher. That is perfectly acceptable as a catcher. So, but that's the thing. For Oakland to contend, they would need like 20 Shea Langoliers. And they don't have 20 of those because it's really, really hard to... No matter how many good prospects you have, no matter how good you are at player development, you just can't... That's not possible. You need to spend money on outside players to supplement the players that you already have. And the A's are not going to do that. Like, will they be better?
You also need Christian Pache to be good after 200.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You can't strike out on these guys. Like, again, and I have more faith in Oakland's player development team than I do in like Washington's or Detroit's. But like, it is still a challenge, no matter how good you are. You know, when you get a bunch of prospects, to make them work for you, especially because if they're going from one organization to another, like a lot of these teams do the same things. But you know, who is to say that, for example, Ken Waldichuk, you know, suddenly doesn't become a worse prospect because something the Yankees were doing with him is materially different than what the A's are going to do with him. There is no guarantee for any of these guys that they turn into anything. And look, I think the A's did very well at the trade line to get the prospects they did. Luis Medina and Ken Waldichuk were the main guys coming back for Frankie Montas. That was really good for them. Those are two really good pitchers, and that's the kind of like pitching upside they're going to need for things to break right, because they need a bunch of guys hitting their 80th plus percentile all roughly at the same time. And there is some hope, I think, future-wise for Oakland. Tyler Soderstrom is a very good hitter, and with I think part of Langoliers coming up now too is to figure out, can this guy be the full-time catcher next year? Because if he can, we're going to bring Soderstrom up to be a first baseman. Because right now, first base in Oakland is empty because they traded Matt Olson and didn't figure out a long-term solution to that position.
Not bad. He hasn't been bad for them this year.
He hasn't been bad, but Seth Brown is better suited to be a platoon guy in a corner outfield or in a DH role. Tyler Soderstrom is a first baseman you build around, you know? And that's... So and that, I think... Year. And I think he's up next year. I don't know Oakland's system well enough beyond that to say with any real authority as to whether or not 2023 can necessarily be better in that regard. I think it can only help to have more good young players, but again, the problem with Oakland is that's the best they're going to do at this point. Maybe a relocated A's team, or one that figures out its stadium situation, and I even then I don't truly buy it, because it's so easy to say, oh, a new stadium and then we'll spend. Well, let's see. An ownership more committed to spending on the major league roster would be the thing that in my mind would turn the A's from, okay, they're just kind of there, to, oh, they're a contender again now. Because as we've seen with the
rumor where Joe Lacob buys them, like that's the rumor that needs to happen. Is Joe Lacob adding to his portfolio with the Warriors, the A's, and investing there and keeping them in Oakland, building the new stadium, that sort of thing, and building their own battery. Like, that's what, if you're an A's fan, that's what you have to hope, is Joe Lacob to just buy this team.
Yeah, and it's like, and part of the thing too is like, we've seen the A's be good in the past, obviously, but it is those runs when they can get enough of those good young guys together, either dudes in the first 3 years of their careers or dudes in the back three who for one reason or another like have not actually gotten raises that big through arbitration or late bloomers in that regard, whatever it happens to be, that it has worked for them, and then they've been able to make enough periphery moves because they're still really good at identifying, like, especially veteran players who can still produce, particularly in bullpen or in platoon roles or off the bench. But that you can only go so far with that, you know, especially when you're running a grand total payroll of $46 million. That just doesn't work. That just simply does not work. Like, you can't build a good major league team for that little money.
Well, it's also weird
that is like a fifth of what the Dodgers spend. You can't do it.
I don't think this stays like this. I think something happens sooner rather than later. This kind of teardown, I'm just not convinced that Fisher owns this team 2 more years. I just don't.
Well, I don't think he wants to unless he I think it's a similar situation with Stuart Sternberg and the Rays, where he's not going to want to own a team that cannot get a good stadium, because that's where these guys have another profit-making opportunity. They all want to pull a Ricketts family. They all want to pull a Liberty Media. They all want a new stadium that the state will pay for, or that the city will pay for, that you can get huge tax breaks on, and that you can then start chucking in a bunch of retail stuff. Especially for the A's, wherever they get in Oakland is going to be somewhere where they basically have it to themselves. But the other part of it is, I don't know if he actually wants to have a baseball team in the city of Oakland. I think he would much rather do like what Joe Lacob did and have a baseball team in San Francisco, or at least somewhere in the middle. But the Giants will never let that happen. The Giants will simply never let an Oakland A's team be anywhere really other than Oakland. So I think the only reality is he either sells the team as part of moving it to someone who buys it and wants to move it to another city, or he just, I don't know, but I guess the long way of saying I think you're right. Like, there's not really much upside in John Fisher owning the A's as anything other than an asset he wants to move. Because until and unless the A's get get either a new stadium or a new location, it is going to be like this. There's no reason to expect that A's ownership will change how it operates until or unless, probably both of those conditions are met. Because I genuinely also think that the A's ownership that John Fisher does not want to keep the A's in Oakland regardless. That
I just don't
unless
the A's.
I mean, I think that's part of it. I think he only wants the A's if everything is essentially paid for. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think he wants the A's if the city and the state give him land and a stadium for free, and if he still gets to run. I think he'd be comfortable being like, oh, we'll move the payroll up to, I don't know why he's like snooty in my head. Oh, we'll run the payroll up to $80 million now. We can afford it. It's like, but I think that's also only ever as far as he's going to be willing to go. This is not a Steve Cohen situation where he's suddenly going to spend, $150 million on one dude, This is never going to be a team that spends a lot of money.
But they could, because they're in the market.
They very much could. I mean, with the right ownership, they very much could. The problem is John Fisher clearly is not the right ownership. And I think you're right that he does not want to own the A's at this point. I just think he doesn't want to own them until he can get something of value out of them, which is to say selling them to someone who will fix the problems they have that he does not have the appetite to fix.
I want to get the emails, though. That's part of his sale, where the amount of emails that were sent and forwarded his way about, like, the animals that were populating the Coliseum.
Oh, yeah. Like,
I want all of those.
The feral cats, the possum in the ceiling of the press box. Like, there's sometimes it really does feel like the Coliseum, or whatever the hell it's called now, it's basically just an abandoned house. Like,
very spoopy.
Yeah, it's like there's just sewage everywhere. The pipes are all messed up. Like, there's tarp hanging from places. Like, it's really sad. Almost.
Like, almost.
The line between endearing and embarrassing is the line between Wrigley and the Coliseum. It's like peeing in a trough in Wrigley is one thing, because you're like, well, this is what they've been doing forever. And I don't know that they have troughs in the Coliseum. Like, I've never actually been to a game there, but I'm assuming that the bathroom facilities in Oakland do not make you feel like, oh, how quaint, how they used to do it back in the day. It probably makes you feel more like, I need a shower. I need a shower immediately. There's nothing that sounds fun about that. Every story about that stadium makes it sound like a haunted house. Like, it's not a good. It makes me very sad for the A's, because this is the other thing. Like, with the players they have on that team, the players they're able to develop, like, you know, they didn't just get Matt Olson and Frankie Montas out of like a tree. You know, they developed those guys. They're very good at developing those players. If they ever had ownership that cared enough to support those homegrown players, they'd be a great team all the time. But until that happens, no, there's no reason to expect the A's to be contenders unless all of the various stars align perfectly for them, which is to say, like, the Astros all need to die, basically. And the Mariners, apparently, at this point. And the Rangers are still probably better. So, yeah, in a two-team AL West, the current A's, I think, could be something. Or the 2023 A's, at least, could be something.
I just don't think we've seen enough for long enough to just like pencil in the Rangers and the Mariners as like tier.
No, I mean the
like,
the Rangers
right
just
open.
The Rangers
It's
just
really
fired their
the Astros.
manager, so they're clearly not in a great place either.
Well, let's talk about that, because Chris Woodward gets fired this week. Kind of a surprise, I think. Did you see the Rangers firing Woodward?
No, I mean I'm not surprised in the sense that they're a below 500 team where their ownership, for as much as I think everyone around them understood, hey, just because you got Corey Seager and Marcus Semien and were willing to pay $500 million for them doesn't immediately make you a contender. This is not the NBA. This is not how these things work. The team around them is still pretty mediocre, if not outright bad. Like, I think there was probably still some expectation that they were going to be better than this. Like, Texas is not a good team. Like, they're just straight up not a good team. You know, they're 11 games below 500. They're 22 games behind the Astros in the West. I know part of, I think, what brought Chris Woodward down was they had an absolutely terrible record in one-run games, which I'm pulling up right now. Which, I mean, on the one hand, you give any manager the bullpen that the Rangers have, and you're probably not going to do particularly well in one-run games either. Like, it's a really bad bullpen on top of everything. You know, they don't have a set closer. They've been doing closer by committee for a while now because Scott Barlow and Joe. I'll check in a minute, but they have a 7-24 record in one-run games. So that's pretty bad. That is pretty bad. Not gonna lie. That is the kind of thing where when you look at it, you're like, I can understand why the manager is getting fired. You know, particularly because they have 513 runs scored, 514 runs allowed by this point. That's a 500 record by Pythagorean record. Like, the numbers, at the very least, the raw numbers say this should be a 500 team. So I have to imagine that's part of it too with Woodward. Is like the front office is looking at those numbers, looking at the team, looking at those numbers, looking at the team, and going, what is the disconnect here? Part of that, though, is the front office still hasn't done enough to make this team good enough. Like,
right, this was year one of them spending and trying again.
Yeah, it is Joe Barlow, by the way. But, like, their best reliever right now is Brock Burke. And that's not to short Brock Burke, who's had a very good season, but, like,
I thought he was debuting for the Mets at third tonight.
That shouldn't happen. Like, you should not have a bullpen where your best pitcher is that dude. Like, maybe he can be one of your best pitchers, but to be not just your best, but far and away your best, because that's the other thing. Like, the other good pitchers there's some good future at least, but I'm getting myself kind of tangled around. But I guess it is to say, like you said, like, this is not a team that was supposed to contend. This was year one of figuring things out. There is some genuine, I think, excitement when it comes to, like, Jonah Heim has had a very good season as a catcher. Seager has been great. Semien has been okay, and that's actually kind of a problem for them because I think they needed Semien to be a lot better than this, because the next years aren't going to get any easier for a dude who is now 31 years old. Like, Adolis Garcia has been a great hitter. Like, Leody Taveras has actually shown an ability to hit major league pitching. Ezekiel Duran has been a nice find for them. Jonathan Hernandez in the bullpen. I think Dane Dunning has shown genuine progress in places, but, like, on the other hand, it's a pretty thin list of things that have gone right, and particularly when it comes to the young guys, Glenn Otto has been really bad. Taylor Hearn has been really bad. Spencer Howard was really bad. Like, Dunning, even for as much as I've just said, you know, he's shown some progress, has still been a below league average pitcher by ERA+. Like, the young guys, some of them are hitting, but, like, Josh Smith has not hit at all. Nathaniel Lowe, I should mention, as someone too, has taken a step forward as, you know, as a useful middle of the order piece, but still, this was not a complete team in terms of contending, in terms of being a contender.
Got 350 plate appearances to this point.
Like, that's not the sign of a team you expect to win when you're giving that many plate appearances to Cole Calhoun or Brad Miller or to Charlie Culberson.
Don't you say it, sir. Don't you do it.
I can't. I'm sorry, but like it's. I mean, maybe part of the. It'd be very funny if this team went out and signed Dansby Swanson in the offseason. That would be very, very funny. But look, there are a lot of holes on this team.
Is that crazy?
I mean, I think it's crazy only in the sense that Josh Young is the future at third base, and if you sign Swanson, you're moving Corey Seager to third base. And granted, Young is coming off a shoulder injury. He just got back into minor league games, I think, within the last week or two. But yeah, you're at that point. Then the question becomes, well, what are we doing with our number one prospect? But like, still, there are holes on this team that are not Chris Woodward's fault. You know, it's not his fault. His rotation has one good pitcher in it in Martin Perez currently, which is also a total surprise. I don't think anyone on the Rangers could have counted on.
It's not his. Not to us on this podcast, John. Are you over 30 and you want to be a good starting pitcher in today's MLB?
That's a good point. Go to Texas. But like, this bullpen is not good. There is nothing really he could have done with that. He can't really do much about the fact that only half his lineup is hitting at any given point. That Semien has slumped a good chunk of the season. That Seager spent a good chunk of the first half slumping pretty badly. A lot of stuff here is not his fault, but again, you look at that one-run record and you're like, some of that is bad performance, but some of that, and as someone who has not watched really any Rangers baseball in the recent past, like, I can't say, you know, with any like authority again, like what his management style is like, or if he's even a good manager, but that is a really bad record in one-run games and suggests that there are some bad decisions being made late in games that the Rangers can and should probably be winning. And at the very least, I never got the sense that Chris Woodward, like, you never really heard him come up as like, oh, this guy is doing amazing things in Texas. Like, the Rangers really looked at this was his 4th year as their manager. And granted, he had some really bad teams as their manager. Like, the Rangers have not been good. Jeez, when was the last when was the last truly good Rangers team? It's been a bit.
It's been almost a decade, right?
Yeah, so their last division-winning team was 2016, and then they got swept out of the ALDS in 3 games. The year before that,
contending team, yeah.
Yeah, the last contending team was the one that lost the one that lost the wild card game to Baltimore in 2012.
10 years.
Joe Saunders of all the dudes. So yeah, it's been 10 years since we've had a really, really good Rangers team. But like the last 3 Rangers teams were just flat out not good. I guess some exception made for the pandemic. But even that pandemic season team played very poorly. Like, that's kind of the other thing. This is, again, Chris Woodward's 4th season in charge. I don't think this is some reflexive thing necessarily on the part of the Rangers. It does just feel like they've thought, okay, this guy's gotten plenty of rope to show us that he knows what he's doing, is making the right decisions, is building connections in the clubhouse, whatever it is they needed to see. And they've decided, you know what? No, like, we're just not seeing any progress. Even when we've given him better tools, we're not seeing enough progress. And that's not necessarily Chris Woodward's fault, but it just didn't really seem like he was making things necessarily any better there. I will be interested to see who Texas decides to go after in the offseason, because this isn't a team that needs like a veteran guy right away, I don't think. I think they need someone who's willing to... They need a long-term investment here. And I think they thought that's what Woodward was, because he was a young guy without any previous managerial experience, kind of part of that immediate post-Alex Cora, Aaron Boone rush. But...
Carlos Beltran.
I think they need someone, and I'd be curious if they end up going with someone who has... It'd be funny if we start circling back around to, actually, maybe it's a good thing to hire minor league managers, because they have shown that they know how to manage not just a game, but a clubhouse in a professional, competitive setting. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more of that, and if Texas wouldn't be one of those teams that just makes a lot of sense for, is to find a guy who's been a bench coach for a bit and has maybe some... potential managerial chops, because that's the other thing. I don't think this is going to be a splash hire, because I don't see Texas had their splash last season. It didn't really work. I don't really know that a splash manager hire that makes any sense for them. Like, I could see them doing something very stupid and hiring Joe Madden, because it's like, ooh, Joe Madden, look at this big name. But I also just wonder if, like, one, does that obviously makes no... I mean, Joe Madden specifically makes no sense, but does that make any sense for where Texas is at in their contention cycle, or whatever the phrase is with the fancy front offices? Or is this just something where it's like, no, we gotta, like, we're still a little bit away, we need to take some time, we need a guy who's like Chris, but maybe has more experience.
What about Purple?
Being a manager. Oh man, poor Clint. I hope he's doing okay, Clint. I hope his face hasn't gotten even darker.
The raisin.
I hope you're not looking that up to prove it, but yeah, I am surprised, if only because, again, like you said, this wasn't supposed to be a good Texas team. But, you know...
Well, can I, like, rant on this for 20 seconds?
Yeah, it's literally your podcast.
So this is something that drives me nuts about, like, baseball is not basketball. And this was something that when people were talking about it, and there was a piece, and I'm not going to cite who it was or anything, but I'm writing about this tomorrow, where, okay, when you look at this roster and you're like, oh, Texas won the offseason, really spending, and they're serious about winning. They're going for it. It's like, well, great. Well, that's not how baseball works. So, yeah, you can sign a Corey Seager and a Marcus Semien, but there's so many other. You have a full bullpen. You have a full rotation. You have so many guys. It's a long season. Depth. Like, you cannot force contention. So when you sign, like, the Corey Seager or a Chris Bryant in Colorado, because there was a piece this week, or I think last week, about, like, well, it really has backfired. The Rockies tried to dip their toes in the Chris Bryant thing, and it's like, no, they were not. That was not signaling that they were trying by just signing Chris Bryant. That's not nearly enough.
That was the Rockies being the only team willing to offer Chris Bryant what Chris Bryant wanted, because everyone else presumably was like, here's like $75 million over like 4 years, and you're going to stand in the outfield forever. Like also, you're going to have to like try.
Right, and the thesis being like, oh, the big move to sign Chris Bryant didn't pay off. It's like, there was no big move. Like, that's not, like, this is not how it works. Like, they were not going to contend with or without Chris Bryant. They did not go into it of like, oh, Chris Bryant's our missing piece to beating the Dodgers and winning the NL West next year. That is not how baseball works. That is not a thing. Like, I'm mad at Chris Bryant and Corey Seager for just choosing to be away from important baseball for the remainder of their prime. Like, I am very upset that those two have made decisions to be, look, get paid, get your money, but they're players just not to be around now.
Well, I should say when I say Texas isn't up for big splashes, at the same time I'd forgotten they drafted Kumar Rocker, number 3 overall, like a month ago or 2 months ago. So I retract that statement. But like, I think you can also I think the easier way to understand Seager and Semien, because when it happened at the time, I think we said, like when we were talking about the Rangers, this is not a move that makes them contenders. This is a move that maybe makes them a 500 team if everything works out, and it's not going to work out that way, because they're, like I said, they're 11 games under right now, and they're probably not going to get there. But regardless, I can understand at least the motivation with Seager. This team really did not have anything in terms of middle infield, anything in its farm system coming up anytime soon. By our rankings, their number 1 shortstop prospect right now is Josh Smith, who is currently a utility guy and is not Corey Seager and probably was never going to be. Next guy up on that list who's listed as a shortstop on our board is Maximo Acosta, who is he's not 16 years old. He is 19, about to turn 20, and is an A-ball. There was no real shortstop of the future in Texas. I can understand why they want to make the long-term investment with Seager. Yeah, he's on the older side for it. Yeah, they had to pay a lot of money to do it. But it's also like he is a guy that they can count on, I think, for the next at least 5 years in terms of being an important core hitter for them at a position that they otherwise weren't going to find anyone. I mean, maybe if they'd waited a year and then seen what the market would have looked like for like Trey Turner or someone, that could have been one thing. But I think they also really decided, well, we just like Corey Seager. Let's just get Corey Seager. Semien, I think, is more about similarly about bridging a gap to a position where Texas did not really have immediate options available within their farm system. They have Justin Foscue as their number 1 second base prospect, and out of the 2020 draft, as a college hitter. So he's someone who, if everything breaks right, should be arriving on the scene shortly. I think that was probably just a hope. Let's see if we can get the last 3 to 4 good years of Marcus Semien's career before things start to turn. Obviously, has not worked out that well. But yeah, I don't necessarily know. I can see this team building in a sense for like the skinny rebuild idea of like, this is not going to be a 4 to 5 year project. This is going to be in 2 to 3 years max. We are going to be a really good team. And part of that was signing Corey Seager, and part of that was drafting both Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker, who are college arms who are like Leiter is going to be part of the 2023 rotation. I would not be surprised if Rocker is part of at least the 2023 bullpen. I mean, I think that's the thing. When you draft a college arm, especially a guy like Leiter, who's pitched in the SEC where it just matters more, and so who understands a highly competitive environment.
Wrong school, but yeah.
Or sorry, Vandy, I said. Which one?
No, I meant wrong school as in he went to the wrong school, because Vandy is the wrong
school. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say he went to Vandy. You just mentioned he went to Vandy. Yeah. Similarly with Rocker, who, I mean, I think that one was just more of like a talent and availability as opposed to, some, like, I don't think they're necessarily evaluating these guys purely in terms of like, whatever it is, in terms of like, oh, he pitched in the SEC, therefore he wants it more. But like, I think that a high polished college arm is the kind of guy where they're hoping 2 years after being drafted, he is to some degree or another ready to go. Because the other thing is with a college arm, you only have so many bullets left at this point. Like, he's older. He had to throw hard in college in a way that a lot of the high school kids don't, because they get to be managed during those college ages, as opposed to having their crusty old SEC coach being like, go on out there for inning number 28 or whatever.
Tony Vitello is both not crusty or old. Very handsome, actually, and very young.
Regardless, I think the Rangers are seeing a future where the 2020, if not the 2023, and I think part of firing Woodward is because they really do think that the 2023 Rangers can and should be better than what the 2022 Rangers have shown, that at the very least in 2024, we're talking about a Rangers team ready to step into the gap, potentially there by the Astros, or maybe not gap, but ready to challenge the Astros, and possibly, if they're still in that point, the Mariners at the top of the AL West. Do I believe that? Not necessarily, no. Like, Texas still has a pretty long way to go, and they haven't done very well with what they've done. But I can at least see why that outline, or I can at least see that outline if that is in fact the direction the Rangers are going, and I can see through that lens how their moves make sense. I just don't know that it's going to work out and pay off at this point. Like, part of it, like, Semien being as bad as he's been, and, like, granted, he's been better the last 3 months than he was the first 2, but he's still pretty rough overall. That's really not good for them. They really needed Semien to continue to be the guy he was in Toronto. I mean, obviously there was going to be some regression of some sort, but they needed better from this than him, because it is every year that goes by is potentially more downhill for him. And this is also someone who is not, yes, I mean, they need Semien to be better. They need better from their pitching staff. Their player development, particularly pitching-wise, has not turned out successes so far. They need better than that. It'll be really interesting to see who they hire as a manager, because I guess they are prone to the flashy, but I don't really know who the flashy manager hire even would be, unless it's some really, really dumb move like hiring Joe Madden.
We'll see. John, quickly, 1 minute on Walker Buehler going out for the season for the Dodgers. Does it affect anything about the Dodgers this year?
Yeah, if only because I think in their heads they were imagining an October rotation at some point of Buehler, Kershaw, Urias, and your choice of Tyler Anderson, Tony Gonsolin, or possibly by that point Dustin May. They can't do that anymore. They need Kershaw back now. Now his back injury becomes that much more important. Like, hopefully this is minor, because they cannot afford for that to get worse, because they cannot afford a postseason without Clayton Kershaw at this point. Their rotation now becomes, they have to have Kershaw, they have to have Urias, they pretty much have to have Gonsolin in there, which is potentially a problem given that he's starting to get to the point where you're like, he's thrown a lot of innings and he's still got a lot more left to go. And even for as much as, he's probably not going to throw more than 3 or 4 innings to start in the postseason, it's still going to be like, he's still going to have a lot of stress on that arm already. You pretty much have to, you're going to assume that either Tyler Alexander or Andrew Heaney is going to get at least 1 playoff start, probably 2. In particular, because of the way that the postseason schedule looks, even though the Dodgers are going to be the number 1 seed and are going to have that first round off, they don't get that day off weirdly that the AL side gets during the division series between games 1 and 2. The NLDS runs game 1, then game 2, back-to-back, day off, game 3, and then game 4. So if the Dodgers need to play a game 4, they're going to need a 4th starter, as opposed to the AL where they could just go back to the top starter if they wanted to. They're going to need at least 4 starters in the NLCS, of course. They're going to need at least 4 starters in the World Series. So without Buehler, that rotation is now Kershaw, or like I said, Kershaw, Urias, probably Gonsolin, and then and Dustin May has looked great in his rehab, and that is at least one thing the Dodgers can feel good about is Dustin May looks great. He could be a part of that group too. The other question now for the Dodgers is, what kind of elbow injury is this for Walker Buehler? Because if it's Tommy John, he's gone for all of 2024 as well. And that's really going to impact what they want to do in the offseason, particularly if Kershaw decides, that's it, I'm done, like, I'm hanging it up, or wants to move on somewhere else at this point. So, yeah, it's not great for the Dodgers. I think they should be able to survive it so long as, particularly if they need Kershaw to come back, and May coming back looking good would be obviously very helpful as well. But regardless, it's going to hurt them. I don't think it's going to sink them, but it is going to hurt them. I think they were really hoping he would come back.
They're going to be active in the free agent market, I think, this winter for a big...
I mean, they're the Dodgers. They kind of have to be.
I think they're like Jacob deGrom
That would be very interesting if they go to him and we're like, we can keep you healthy. We can figure it out. We can do it. We can make you a 180 inning pitcher.
Not to put in any ideas. In
180. He's thrown like 220 before.
Andrew Friedman, but wouldn't rule it out.
No, I'm sure I'm sure the Dodgers front office has an entire like division dedicated to just thinking about Jacob deGrom and whether or not they can make it work.
Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week?
Today at Fangraphs, we ran a quick check-in on Stephen Kwan from Justin Choi that was really nice. A guy that who had a very big debut onto the scene in April, kind of fell apart from there, but is back and is showing himself to be more than just a early flash in the pan. Definitely recommend people read Dan Szymborski's take on the Tatis suspension. He gets very in depth into what it means for San Diego going forward, productions wise, all that fun stuff. Ben Clemens is going to do something on the injured players in playoff races. So in particular, he's going to be looking at we were injuries that I swear we just didn't mention for whatever reason that the Astros and Dodgers are dealing with. Oh, the loss of Buehler, which we just talked about, as well as Michael Brantley for the Astros. Dan is also which is I don't think that's a huge deal for the Astros necessarily, but outfield is not a spot where they have a ton of depth right now. So again, something where I think they would have welcomed him back. It was someone they would have happily welcomed back and whose absence is going to challenge their depth in ways that they may or may not really be all that well suited to deal with right now. And then the other thing I recommend that we're going to run tomorrow is Dan is going to look at the postseason schedule, which was just released over the weekend, to take a look at how it favors some teams and why. Definitely check that out. I'm sure he's going to go into that issue where the ALDS gets 1 day in between games 1 and 2, whereas the NL does not, and what that's going to mean for the National League teams having to deal with that down the stretch. Also, the fact that there is no travel day between, I believe, games 4 and 5 of the ALCS, or games 5 and 6 of the ALCS and 5 and 6 of the NLCS, which very well could be cross-country pennant series based on the playoff seedings and the way things might shake out. So definitely check that out tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll just be doing the usual good stuff we do. Come on down, join us, Fangraphs. Fangraphs is great. Join Fangraphs.
There you go.
That sounded very natural and human.
Hey, no, that's what you should do.
Yeah,
go
you
join
should do it.
Fangraphs.com today. Jon Tayler,
you'll make me happy.
There you go.
Yeah.
John, as you fade away into the bleak darkness.
I was going to say, I forgot to turn the lamp on directly overhead of me. I should have done that because I'm very much looking like I am just being swallowed by the darkness hole.
Aren't we all? Jon Tayler, always a pleasure. I will talk to you next week.